Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have an exciting show for you this evening. A lot of changes here in Oregon this week. The Secretary of State placed a measure on the ballot to legalize marijuana for this November. So Oregon joins Washington Alaska and Washington, D.C. to vote on legalizing marijuana this November. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We have a couple of great guests. Benton McKenzie and his wife Loretta McKenzie are here. They are marijuana refugees from the state of Iowa, and their story's been getting a lot of attention. Fortunately, they've been prosecuted for using medical marijuana to treat Benton's terminal cancer. And so, and standing by in the wings as well is Mr. John Cornett, who's ready to start playing some music for you right after we bring the news. Until then, let's bring on our infamous dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
All right, so tonight's hemp news. It's official here in Oregon. Our voters will decide in November whether to regulate and tax marijuana for adults 21 and over. The Oregon Secretary of State, Kate Brown, has certified that New Approach Oregon's petition campaign has turned in enough valid signatures to qualify the Control, Regulation, and Taxation of Marijuana and Industrial Hemp Act for the November ballot. According to the Secretary of State's website, 145,030 unverified signatures were submitted for verification. Of those, 88,084 signatures, or 64.41% of the 135,722 that were accepted for verification were valid. To qualify for the ballot, 87,213 were needed. So they made it by about 1,300 signatures. Tuesday's announcement comes almost exactly 2 weeks after Washington State began regulated sales of marijuana. New data shows that Washington State's received about $318,000 in excise taxes in the first 10 days of regulated marijuana sales. The proposed measure in Oregon would allow for licensed and regulated cultivation and sale of marijuana. Sales would be taxed to generate money for schools, state and local police, and drug treatment, prevention, and mental health programs. Across the mighty Columbia River to the north, Washington State recreational marijuana sales only began 2.5 weeks ago in Washington State, and it didn't take the price gouging long to get started. Ramsey Hamid, the manager of Main Street Marijuana, a recreational cannabis store in Vancouver, Washington, said that when he saw what came in, a shipment of cannabis from a new grower this week, he decided no thanks, deciding to close his doors until he can get a more variety, lower prices, and better quality. Hamid said some of the growers and processors are trying to charge him $6,000 per pound for marijuana. He said that's triple the normal price. Hamid said of the growers, he says, have been selling low quality marijuana for high prices. Hamid said, quote, "I'm not going to let these guys hold us hostage anymore. It's hurting the entire system and it needs to stop. By continuing to play ball with these guys, it's just making things worse," end quote. Mead said Main Street Marijuana there in Vancouver, Washington would likely remain closed through the weekend and possibly well into the next week. Washington State has already had a significant marijuana shortage. Seattle's Cannabis City, for instance, closed down after just 3 days of sales. Fewer than 100 of the 2,500 or so growers who applied for growing licenses from the state have so far been approved, and the growers who have licenses say they didn't have enough time to harvest because it takes at least 10 weeks to grow even the fastest maturing cannabis varieties. Store closures have occurred around the state due to the lack of marijuana, and tales of long customer lines, customer complaints, and high prices are the order of the day. One grower, Jared Hurling of Farmer Jay's in Spokane, admitted his prices have been high, but claimed it's because his farm sells a premium product. Hurling says some Washington state growers have falsely represented their marijuana as premium and are trying to grab as much money as quickly as possible, as the stores are desperate for cannabis right now. Hurley said, quote, "Unfortunately, when someone's advertising as a premium product, then it's virtually unsellable. It makes us all look bad. Quality comes at a price," end quote. Hamid said the grower who tried to gouge Main Street marijuana wanted an extremely high price for low potency marijuana, and as if that weren't bad enough, also asked for a surprise $200 delivery fee that he demanded out of pocket when he arrived. Hamid said, quote, "And for all that, what we got was really poorly trimmed. The buds were leafy and small. There was a ratio of stem to bud that was too high. It was crap," end quote. The store had already pre-purchased a limited amount of the marijuana and had to sell it to recover costs, but Hamid said he won't be fooled again. He said, quote, "It was embarrassing to sell that stuff to our customers. They deserve much better. It's been frustrating for them, it's frustrating for us, and I won't reopen until I have multiple strains so people have better choices," end quote. New Amsterdam, Vancouver's other recreational marijuana store, has had similar problems. It hasn't been able to stay open as much as the operators wanted because it has refused to do business with growers selling overpriced, poor quality product. According to Brian Buds, the co-owner, he says, quote, "We've definitely turned down opportunities with growers that were clearly price gouging. We've had to shut down sometimes when we would be open, but we've had a price ceiling with this that we decided early we wouldn't violate, and we've stuck to that," end quote. So the market will continue to develop up in Washington, and hopefully our Oregon system will be implemented much better. It actually is better that that the medical marijuana supply system is regulated here in Oregon. That will help, as it helped in Colorado when they opened their recreational stores. And according to Moody's, the investor service, high taxes and a low number of storefront licenses mean that revenue from legalized marijuana sales in Washington state could be minimal this year. According to Moody's investor service, state licensed recreational marijuana stores opened in Washington on July 8th, and the state estimated it will collect $51 million in revenues during the upcoming 2015 biennial budget. But Moody's said on Monday that high taxes, marketplace competition, and supply challenges could lower that number. The ratings agency warned that Washington's sky-high excise tax of 25% applied at 3 points along the supply chain, producer, processor, and retailer, and the sales tax of 9.6% might deter consumers. Combined, the trio of 25% taxes means an effective tax rate of over 80%. The tax structure in Washington is likely to be a major deterrent from consumers being able to obtain cannabis through regular stores. Colorado, in contrast, charges a 15% excise tax and a 12.9% consumer sales tax. So their system seems to be working quite a bit better. So our next story tonight is about the death of legendary actor James Garner, who's portrayed two of television's most memorable characters in Maverick and Rockford Files. He died last Sunday at the age of 86. Garner was a longtime supporter of marijuana legalization, and in his memoirs said he'd used cannabis for 50 years, even adding, quote, "I don't know where I'd be without it. I started smoking marijuana in my late teens," Garner wrote in his memoir, The Garner Files. He said, quote, "I drank to get drunk, but ultimately didn't like the effect. Not so with grass. Grass was smooth," Garner wrote. It had the opposite effect from alcohol. It made me more tolerant and forgiving. I smoked marijuana for 50 years, Garner wrote. I don't know where I'd be without it. It opened my mind to a lot of things, and now its active ingredient, THC, relaxes me and eases my arthritis pain. Gardner quoted, I've concluded that marijuana should be legal and alcohol should be illegal, but good luck with that, end quote. Gardner was best known for his laid-back, wisecracking style on Maverick and the Rockford Files. His quick wit and avoidance of conflict provided a stark contrast to other leading men, like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. Gardner was found dead of natural causes at his home in the Brentwood area of Los Angeles Saturday evening. He'd suffered a stroke in May 2008, a few weeks after his 80th birthday. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. Now we're going to jump over and Mr. John Credette has some music. Hey, John.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a song that I recorded about 25 years ago. I co-produced it with a guy named Charlie Lushman. It's called Let's Make the Best of It Now.
Right.
Did you know the earth will sun one day, and everything on earth will melt away? All the oceans rise above the land, drowning every woman, every man. Oh, let's make the best of it now. We'll be just another asteroid floating through the mind of Sigmund Freud. So many years we've been up on this place. Can you believe the future that we face? Oh, let's make the best of it now. 'Cause you never know when your time will pass. You've got to do just what you want to do. And if somebody tries to ruin your day, walk away. Did you notice that the world's so strange? 'Cause our atmosphere's about to change. So many reasons that we've killed the trees. Life is passing with a subtle breeze. Oh, let's make the best of it now. Another chapter as we age, 'cause we exist within the nuclear age. I know that freedom's heard around the globe. Just where our future lies, well, nobody knows. Oh, let's make the best of it now. 'Cause you never know when the sky will fall. Maybe the moon will reach the earth one day. We're not the same race that we used to be. Can't you see? Now the next time that you fall in love, just appreciate the sky above. 'Cause the sun is shining on and on. So open up your eyes before it's gone. Oh, let's make the best of it now. Oh, let's make the best of it now. Oh, let's make the best of it now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, how are you, Casper? Good to see you. Loretta, I'd like to welcome you to the show, and Benton McKenzie. We talked about you in the last week in particular, after your conviction for growing your medical marijuana in Iowa. I'd like to welcome you on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming on. So, you want to tell us how this all started? Maybe we'll start with you, Loretta, how this came about.
Well, about 4 years ago, in 2010, Ben had noticed some lumps he had on his posterior. Being a former naturopathic physician's assistant, he could kind of almost predict that it might be cancer, but he wasn't quite sure. He got blown off by his family doctor. He wasn't going to give us a referral, so he told him it was a calcium deposit, don't worry about it. But he was already growing some marijuana for the purpose of dealing with his heart condition, kind of keeping his blood pressure at a rate where it would give him a little bit of energy and kind of turn off the gravity amplifier. He'd been watching YouTube. He saw the YouTube show on, I guess, the Rick Simpson story. And when he learned about that, Run from the Cure. And so he decided to apply that, just thinking, this lump might be cancer. And he applied it, and he thought, well, if it's not, let's just see what it does. Well, he had a golf ball sized, well, he found out later it was a tumor. And after applying it topically for within about 2 months, it shrank down to the size of down to a little pink spot. I mean, it went below the surface of the skin and disappeared. So eventually, someone must have called the police, thinking they smelled marijuana in our apartment, and so we were raided. And he had shown the police officer what he had been using the marijuana for, that he was making cannabis oil, and he even showed him, how he applied it before he confiscated it, before the officer Detective Furlong confiscated it. So we were arrested. We went through a year of basically firing attorneys, trying to get someone who would represent us and not force us to plea out. And then eventually, we just gave up on that and went ahead and took a guilty plea of manufacturing. He wanted to present a medical defense. No one was going to hear it, and they just weren't going to go with it. So we had been on probation for a couple of years. During the first couple of months in 2011, he had gone to, finally got a referral to an oncologist who came back with a result after giving him a biopsy that it was in fact angiosarcoma cancer. It is a cancer of the inner lining of the blood vessels, which appears as tumors on the skin, above the surface of the skin. And so while on probation, Ben decided to just try to get a hold of whatever plant material he could. Sometimes ditchweed, friends would harvest some out of the field. In Iowa it just grows everywhere. And he would make cannabis oil out of that. Sometimes he had to go to the street to buy cannabis oil, but eventually, he was able to acquire just enough for a couple of grams here or there. He would ingest them, and he was able to keep the tumors from growing, and some of them would even shrink. Some of the smaller ones especially. Now this went on for about 2.5 years, and then in June 2013, I'm getting ahead of myself. He started growing cannabis in a trailer in the backyard. His best friend helped him, and he had all higher CBD strains. I think he had Cannatonic, which I think came from some Z7s seeds that he'd ordered from Mr. Nice, I think. And so he had plants that were, eventually going to possibly, if he could acquire enough, he could make enough oil to maybe wipe out this cancer, because at this point it was at stage 1. They were really small tumors. Well, and then 2013, June of 2013, we were raided, and they brought about 20 SWAT agents in at 5:45 a.m. to the house, banging on the door, screaming. I was the first one to the door, and I had about 6 agents pointing, some pretty high-powered weaponry in my face. So, it kind of scared the crap out of all of us.
I can imagine. Or actually, I've been in that situation myself, so I know what that's like.
Yeah, and his elderly parents were upstairs, you know, it kind of, it shocked them. There was just the 5 of us living there.
So they ended up prosecuting all 5 of you, though.
They did.
The parents, your son,
Mm-hmm.
both of you.
Yeah.
That's just outrageous.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they do, is they try to pile on as many charges as they possibly can so they can then manipulate you to do what they want you to do. Like, we're going to torture your wife and your son and your parents if you don't do exactly what we say to do. You know, it's disgusting, you know, that our law enforcement has turned to this. It's really the prosecutors and the police are in charge of the whole system and choosing how to charge you and make you, you know, dance to their tune or else, right?
Yeah, it appeared that way. They didn't arrest his parents, but they did charge them with operating a drug house. Kind of makes it sound
How
like
old
a
are your
meth
parents,
lab.
Benton?
What are they? 70.
They're respectively, I think 70, at the time they were 76 and 77 years old.
That's
So
right.
Benton, I
Oh.
just got to let our audience know, you've been the recipient of some beneficial cannabis oil here in Oregon as a legal medical marijuana patient. I'm proud to say that, you know, we were able to help you get that medical marijuana permit, and have helped you out with some medicine in the past. But
Yeah.
I know, but right now you're on a pretty big dose of
I'm on
RSO oil.
a heavy
so-
dose, yeah.
Yeah,
6 grams a day.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
That 6 grams is, in fact, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody taking 6 grams in a single day. So
Yeah.
that's a lot.
I figured you vaporized twice that much.
You would think so, but no, it's not true. Maybe.
I wish I could.
Uh-huh.
Well, half of my right lung is full of tumors, I just found out.
So now that cancer is metastasized to your lungs and where else?
And my liver.
Your liver and your lungs. And so you've just been convicted when? About 10 days ago?
Just about 2 weeks ago, yeah.
About 2 weeks ago. And so fortunately, you're with a bond, the state has allowed you to come here and visit Oregon a few
Right.
times.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So they started letting me come here so I could survive to make it to the end of the trial.
Right.
So I could
Good point. Do you want to
convict
go
me
on
for
with the
doing it.
story, Loretta, and what happened?
Sure.
from
Well,
there?
when we were arrested, his parents had bonded us out. But a couple of weeks later, because we'd been on probation, our probation officers issued warrants for our arrest again. So back to jail we went. This time, there was a $5,000 cash-only bond held over both of us. And so his parents being, you know, broke, completely unable to get us out, they couldn't do anything about it. We ended up staying there. Well, he stayed in for 40 days. He was constantly trying to draw to the attention of the medical staff his tumors, which were starting to grow without anything. And
I've got to say that I've seen some pictures of your tumors online, and I'm just very sorry that you have to endure such painful lesions there. They look look pretty bad. I've seen some other people with sarcoma back before they had the antiviral agents when people were dying from AIDS.
Yeah.
Kind of reminded me of that. It's a similar kind of cancer, isn't it?
I imagine it's very
I
similar.
think
yeah.
it might be the same form that ended up killing so many AIDS patients, as you have a compromised immune system.
That too. My immune system is not quite as compromised as it could
As
be.
they
or probably should be, actually.
Yeah, but you've
yeah.
got this rare form of cancer. So you want to tell us about the trial, Loretta?
yes, well, it's taken several months since we got out of jail. We had pretty good representation, each of us. They had a lot of different things that they wanted to do. They wanted to try to see if they could get all of the evidence suppressed and the whole case thrown out of court, because we live in a rural area in Iowa. It's on private property. And so when the police had been going through our trash to try to find something, they said they found a stem, and that was the justification for the warrant. They had been trespassing on a private drive. So we had upcoming motions, hearings for the motions on suppression to try to see if the warrant was even valid. All of these different things. So it's taken, it's taken an entire year since the original raid. But we wanted a jury of our peers, and fortunately we had attorneys who were, with it all the way. They were filing motions, they were doing everything they could. And problem is, his good attorney lost her license because, well, it doesn't seem to make any sense. She had been doing a lot of work for him, and I think that there was somebody higher up trying to kind of cut her out of the way. And as I'll describe to you what happened during the trial, sort of the control, be it mind control or just wanting to have another conviction no matter what. It seemed like it was not a fair trial. The judge would not allow a medical defense. He wouldn't even allow Ben to tell the jury that he had cancer. He wasn't even allowed to discuss his condition at all.
So the jury had no idea what you folks were facing or the very reason you were doing this. And then they also prosecuted your son.
Yes. Yeah. And, well, his friend originally, but they offered a plea agreement to his friend, and I guess he took it because he was very scared. He wasn't going to be throwing us under the bus, mind you. He had been looking for an opportunity to become a state's witness so that it would give him an opportunity to, when, taking the witness stand, to just, risk getting thrown in contempt of court, to say, look, this is what my friend was going through. I was helping him. He has cancer. He was making cannabis oil. Well, it seemed like the state was pretty much onto the strategy of our defense, and they didn't allow that. It controlled every aspect, every aspect of the jury trial. And it took a good 3 days to even select a jury because so many people had already read newspaper articles that the Quad City Times writer Brian Wellner had been following up on our stories since September of last year. And there was just so much control and, constantly keeping the jury in the dark. They would take them in the other room to address issues going on with Ben's health. He needed to take a lot of breaks. And then on the 7th of July, right in the middle of the trial, he pretty much collapsed. We had to rush him to the hospital, called an ambulance, and his potassium levels and his hemoglobin had just dropped. He'd been sweating profusely, just having cold sweats for the last couple of months, because at this point he's at stage 4 of his cancer. Everything metastasized when he was in jail, so it just kind of went from stage 1 to stage 3 to stage 4 in a matter of months. So he's at the point now where cold sweats and nausea and things like that start to set in. So, I mean, this happened, without the jury having any idea. They were just shoved off to their little deliberation room, probably under lock and key, and not allowed to even look out the window and see the fire trucks that came pulling up in front of the ambulance pulling up in front of the courthouse. And the judge was not very understanding, like he promised he would be, about Ben's condition. He basically thought that Ben was malingering, that maybe he was faking something to try to get out of this trial, which is not the case at all. We got him to the hospital and they had to give him a transfusion. And the doctor's orders were, no, he's not going anywhere tonight. He's staying here. We're going to watch over him. And the next morning they were trying to address, keeping his pain medication stabilized and all of those things. But the judge was insistent, well, he needs to be back the next morning. We need to get on with this trial. So it was inhumane. It's
incredibly inhumane.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm ashamed for our government that's done this to you. And, I wish I could offer you sanctuary here in Oregon. I mean, maybe we can put you in a local church or something, and say, no more. They're in the safe zone. That's an ancient concept that we should have something like that, I think, especially for someone going through that. It's just heartbreaking.
Well, we appreciate it, too. There's just no way we could bow out of this fight now.
Right.
Well,
You know, we take phone calls, and I know there's been at least one caller standing by so that people can ask questions or make statements on occasion. It just adds a little bit to the show. I know some callers have been standing by. So let's go ahead and take one of those calls. Welcome to the show.
Hello, it's me.
Yes, hello.
Hi. I got a couple of questions. I'm right in the middle of in my bud cycle indoors, and I think I've got some spider mites. How can I get rid of them?
I recommend alternating. Well, if you're in your blood cycle, best thing to do is soapy water. Just get some soapy water and spray them as often as you can, and try to kill them with your fingers. And then once you harvest, then if they get covered over in webs and nets too badly, even after you've done this process 2 or 3 times, you might want to just harvest, start over again, and just do a real good job cleaning. You know, this is mite season. The drier it is, the more mites are flying around in the air, so it's hard to keep them out. During the vegetative cycle, I always inoculate the plants with neem oil, which kind of protects them, but you don't want to use neem oil during the flower cycle. So that's my best advice.
Okay, and the second question is, I've got psoriasis really bad on my knees. Does a salve or anything like that, would that help?
Yeah, in fact, if you can get an RSO-based topical, that I've heard of incredible success in wiping out psoriasis with an RSO-based topical, something made with the really strong, high-potency RSO oil seems to cure that. There are some soap products out there that are made with RSO that once you scrub that on there, you want to let it set on the affected area for a while, and then I think you'll see some success in getting rid of it.
All right. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
You know, we have a little video that we're going to run right now. This is an excerpt about Benton and Loretta McKenzie from the Young Turks program, very popular internet program, and it includes a little segment with Ben Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz is from an old Hollywood family of producers and directors, and he's also a host on Turner Movie Classics as well. So here's a little story about the McKenzies.
This is from the Huffington Post. A terminal cancer patient who says he grew marijuana to treat his tumors was found guilty of drug charges yesterday by an Iowa jury that wasn't even allowed to hear his defense. Benton McKenzie, who's 48 years old, was convicted in Iowa District Court jury of marijuana manufacturing and conspiracy, along with his wife Loretta, who's 43. Their son Cody, who's 22, was found guilty of misdemeanor possession of marijuana and paraphernalia. Are you kidding me? Benton McKenzie, who had been barred by the judge from a defense that explains he grew cannabis. Defense. Hey man, sometimes I say modem, and people get super freaked out about that too. His defense that explains that he grew cannabis to relieve, this is very serious, his aggressive and rare cancer of his blood vessels. He faces a minimum of 3 years in prison, where he's going to be sentenced later. His family said that they intend to appeal the verdict, and by the way, McKenzie said that prison will probably kill him anyway, because his health is in such horrible, horrible disarray.
So the crazy part of the story is that the judge didn't even allow him to use his illness as part of his defense, right?
Which I don't understand.
So in Iowa, the reason why the judge was able to legally do that is because they have not legalized medicinal marijuana. So since medicinal marijuana is illegal, you can't use it as part of your defense. Now, there is an exception for those who have epilepsy. There we go. So if you have epilepsy, you can use medicinal marijuana in Iowa, but that is not what he has. He has a terminal cancer.
So he was just using this for pain relief.
He was using this for pain relief.
He doesn't have epilepsy, which is, I'm sure, no picnic.
First time anyone's ever been bummed out they didn't have epilepsy.
Exactly. Yeah. He has something that's so horrible and creates lesions on his skin, and he says he's probably going to die from it in a few years anyway.
Yeah, it's the good news is that that's a decision that there's no good news, but the silver lining, the ray of hope.
Yeah.
We could find. Eventually we'll find the right cliche. Keep searching. The ray of hope here, I would think, as a non-lawyer who watches a lot of shows with lawyers on them, so I pretty much know what I'm talking about. But that would be that the judge's decision here, that seems appealable. And that not being allowed to state your defense, which again, I mean, it's essentially like saying to a jury, if a guy, someone does something terrible and kills a family member, and then the family member responds by killing the guy, the judge telling the jury, no, you can't even hear about what his state of mind was at the time. Like, that's not, we don't have an exception to murder for that, but I would imagine you'd be able to say that because you'd want to win sympathy with the jury, and having the jury sympathize with your plight would be helpful, relevant here. So I would imagine that that could be actionable and might get him a new trial, especially from a judge who is just sympathetic to it and knows that even scheduling a new trial is going to delay the process and keep him out of prison.
And I would think that the other thing, and again, this just might be the hippy-dippy Californian in me, but even if they don't hear that defense, I pray that members of the jury are like, it was weed. Why are we having this conversation? Right. And I'm from the Midwest, and I know that people take this stuff a lot more seriously, and the lax nature of getting high and blah, blah, has not really reached the middle of the country in a lot of cases. But I would like to think that in 2014, there are going to be people like, whatever.
I'm surprised a little by it. I'm surprised by, there's something, we're over 20 states now that at least have some form of medicinal marijuana. Right. Some states, of course, have legalized it completely. I'm surprised Iowa isn't one of them. Of those Midwestern states, you're from Kansas. Mm-hmm. Kansas is conservative. Nebraska is conservative. Iowa isn't. Yeah. Parts of it are, but it's a fairly progressive state. It's a blue state. It's had Democratic governors. It's elected Democrats. Iowa, and keep in mind,
to give you a number, really quickly, I got to jump in. 81% of people living in Iowa are in favor of marijuana legalization. So yes, it's very liberal when it comes to this issue, but they still haven't legalized it.
So you could get the right judge, because also remember that the Iowa Supreme Court was one of the first, I think I'm right about this, was one of the first state Supreme Courts to allow gay marriage. Like, they threw out the only man and woman statute, and gay marriages were happening in Iowa. So, as he works his way up, hopefully nobody's going to try to put this guy in prison pending his appeal. Right.
And I guess the ray of hope is that if it didn't happen in a state where it's legal, at least it was Iowa, if they have those stats, in his favor.
I mean, look, if he's convicted and they reject his appeal, he faces a minimum of 3 years behind bars, which is crazy. And look, I think the reason...
Okay, well, that was an excerpt from the Young Turks, obviously. You've got a lot of support out there. This is just one of the many things that are appearing out there in the media. Now, what do you think? They mentioned an appeal bond. Right now, you're here in Oregon on a bond. Do you think it's likely? Have you had any communication that says you might be allowed to continue to be on appeal bond?
Well, I'm actually not on a bond. My wife is out on bond, but they let me out of jail to avoid any medical expenses.
I see.
So technically, until sentencing, if they sentence me to any jail time or anything at all, they're gonna try to put me in prison. I don't know if they'll wait until I apply or appeal it before they try to put me in jail. Otherwise, if they put me in jail, then I can bond out from there. Probably.
Casper?
I was just all the support that seems to be rallying around the case and all that you've gone through. I know in California they have groups that show up at courthouses with signs and make a lot of noise outside. So
have you had any community support?
Has there been?
There was noise of it happening, but we haven't seen a lot.
So you're in a little area, though. Anyway. There's not any big urban area except Des Moines in Iowa, right? So
for its area, the Quad Cities area is pretty big. It's about Iowa City size, maybe even bigger. But the community support's been really.
And why did you have such a problem with your attorneys taking your case in the direction you wanted? I mean, it's your case.
I was saddled with him with a month to go before jury selection, and then I wasn't even contacted by him for another 2 weeks. So we had 2 weeks to go to build a case, and first thing he wanted was to try to deal with this on a plea, and I just demanded he never ever enter into that train of thought again. And that's when we started clashing. But he had plans on trying to change things instead of being straight with me and backing out when I still had time to give somebody else exactly the same chance he had to at least support me. Or
Loretta, how do you think things are going to go for yourself and your son and your husband here? Do you have any insight or just hopes and prayers?
Hopes and prayers, mostly.
Yeah.
It's been suggested that we'll have. I did talk to his former attorney, and she said something about appeals bond. So I'm really not completely, educated about that whole process. We have talked to a couple other people who have been through this process before, who think that we are in a position to wait. I really don't. At this point, I don't think after all the attention that this judge, Henry Latham, has had, which has not been the right kind of attention. He certainly is not a hero. Now everyone in Iowa, and basically nationwide, since the story went out on the Associated Press, it's been everywhere. They've had to shut down the phone lines to his lines and the prosecutors' phone lines, and there's just been so many people calling. I think
when is your sentencing coming up? You're here in Oregon for just a few days, like a week or less than a week?
Yeah, the sentencing is on August 28th.
August 28th. So you want people to contact this judge and to be there in support of you on August 28th, obviously.
There is also a group on Facebook, Free Benton McKenzie.
So it's facebook.com/Free Benton.
Yeah, and Free Benton McKenzie is actually the public group.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and freebenton.org is the website that some local people did put together. But they do have some. They do have basically an event coming up, and there are quite a few people that are planning on being there. I guess I'm not sure. That will be at the Scott County Courthouse in Davenport, Iowa.
I see.
So we will have some people showing up, maybe with picket signs, maybe just to show up in the courtroom, if they'll let them in.
So what's this judge's name in Scott County, Iowa, Davenport, Iowa?
Yes.
What's his name?
Judge Henry Latham.
Henry Latham. All right.
Yes.
We'll be taking your phone calls. If you have questions for the McKenzies or any of us, you can call us. If you're watching on July 25th, we're live on July 25th. If it's not July 25th, don't call in. But the number is 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. I'm going to go through with the things we have laid out here very quickly as an educational. This is hemp twine. Every week we cut off a little piece of this hemp twine and put it into this shot glass and light it because it demonstrates 100% hemp energy, and that's why marijuana was made illegal. Drugs are a smokescreen brought to us by the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, crony, capitalist ruling class. And this is to demonstrate that hemp is energy, and when we restore hemp without the restrictions involved on its THC level, but to grow the varieties that produce the most and best energy, protein, food, and fiber, we will resolve a lot of both ecological problems, economic problems, and environmental problems. This is a big thing of hemp oil, a very nifty hemp
body
lotion. This is a poster. We'd like to thank the Wonder Knack. This is on some 100% hemp paper from Germany. Wonder Knack produces this, and this is another Wonder Knack product. Wonder has a hemp store over in Multnomah Village. He has these nifty 100% hemp fiber backpacks and other hemp products. And she also gave us this little pack of chocolate-covered hemp seeds. Or she gave me a different one that I ate, and that's the one we have here. Anyway, and they're very tasty, I might add. We have a little video from RT, Russian television news in English, about industrial hemp that we're going to run right now. We'll be back in just a moment after this video. Stay tuned.
Did you know that there's a plant strong enough to replace plastic, oil, and building materials? That the same plant has been cultivated for industrial purposes for over 12,000 years. Yet it's been classified as a Schedule I controlled substance drug by the U.S. government. Nope, not marijuana, hemp. Recently, Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner James Cormer has requested a legal review of the steps necessary for hemp regulation if the federal ban is lifted on growing the crop. That's right. Kentucky could soon be reviving an industry that only a century ago was considered to be the most important cash crop and vital to the strength of the U.S. economy. So let's backtrack a little bit and talk about what hemp actually is. Throughout human existence, hemp has been used as an important source of fuel, clothing, shelter, and even food for people all over the world. In this country, industrial hemp was widely cultivated since America's first settlers arrived in the early 1600s. In fact, even our founding fathers acknowledged hemp's enormous benefits. George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson all grew hemp on their private farms. And Jefferson was even quoted once as saying hemp is one of the greatest important substances of our nation. The Declaration of Independence itself was even drafted on paper derived from hemp. So what happened? How did one of the most versatile and adaptable species of crops in the world also become one of the most politically polarizing agricultural resources? Well, in the early 20th century, the plant became labeled a threat so dangerous that it should be wiped out. But it wasn't dangerous to anyone or anything except the industries that it could phase out of existence. So what did the establishment do to ensure their allegiance to the very industries they serve? Well, they did what they do best. They lied and smeared hemp through a propaganda campaign that associated the plant with marijuana. And in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act redefined hemp as a narcotic, which required farmers to obtain a special tax stamp to grow the crop. By 1970, the Controlled Substances Act made growing the crop without a DEA-issued permit strictly illegal. Because of the government crackdown on the crop, it has a negative association. And at this point, you still might be confused because of years of being brainwashed to think that hemp is exactly the same as marijuana, or that its close association with it must classify it as a drug. But this couldn't be farther from the truth. Just check out the Congressional Research Service report on hemp that states, quote, although marijuana is also a variety of cannabis, it is genetically distinct from industrial hemp, and it is further distinguished by its use and chemical makeup. So, hemp is genetically distinct from the drug, marijuana. In fact, if you smoked an entire garbage bag full of hemp, you wouldn't get high. Yet the plant remains illegal under U.S. federal law. And like I said before, not because it's a danger to people, but because it's a danger to corporations. In the early 20th century, hemp competed heavily with the cotton and paper industry. Because paper made from trees had to compete against environmentally friendly hemp products, the paper industry was at risk to suffer. So William Hearst, a New York State congressman and one of the biggest newspaper publishers in America, launched a campaign against hemp. He used his publication to smear the public's perception of the crop, which at the same time was threatening his successful paper company. In fact, this very campaign is where the term yellow journalism derived from. But this was in the 1920s. How is the propaganda still working today? Because the threat hemp poses isn't limited to paper. Reviving the industry could potentially devastate the profits of huge corporations that manufacture lumber, fossil fuels, steel, alcohol, and even food, among many other things, including this. In 1941, Henry Ford even built a car made almost entirely from hemp. The frame of the car was 12 times lighter than steel and 10 times stronger. Not only that, but the car was powered by hemp seed oil. Do I even have to explain the threat that this technology would pose to giant oil companies? Processed hemp also creates one of the strongest fibers we know of, providing all natural materials to build homes, ships, trains, planes, and automobiles, and practically indestructible clothing. Furthermore, hemp seed oil can be made into lotions and skin creams. The practical applications for this plant are limitless, and the reason it remains illegal is simple. It's just one giant push to preserve the profits of corporations that poison our planet, destroy our forests, and bankrupt the world. But this all could change if recent efforts in Kentucky are any indication, and if moves by a few key members in the U.S. Senate succeed. hemp could soon be removed from the government's list of Schedule I controlled substances. The hemp industry could very well be revived back to being America's #1 cash crop. And that's one step closer to succeeding against a model of profit, greed, and control that sadly defines this country today.
Go ahead, Casper.
I can't believe that. Can you imagine the change of wealth we would have if that happened? We could be having farmers paying their bills, and we could have new jobs across the country. We could have taxes taking care of potholes and building schools instead of corporations getting rich and CEOs trying to figure out which yacht to buy.
And torturing our sick and dying people.
Oh, I don't
like
mind that.
That's the McKenzies.
I'm used to that. You got to have that. Otherwise, doctors have no income, right? Right?
No.
Isn't that what we got to have? That you got to have sick people.
No, there's just another branch that needs to be reorganized.
Well,
so we're working to do that. Actually,
I was telling her during break, I want to get married to a corporation. Eli Lilly, I'm yours.
Okay. So you've got to go back, what, Tuesday? Back to Iowa? And then any chance you'll be back into the free zone, Oregon, before your August 28th sentencing?
Probably not before. We'll see what happens after. I'm not sure if we're out on appeal bond. I guess we just have to find out if we can leave the state again during this appeal process. I really don't know. We certainly want to be back, as soon as we can.
Hopefully directly afterwards,
Yeah.
I see. Well, we certainly hope to have you back. I know that, your case when they locked you up for 40 days and you couldn't use your medicine, that's when these tumors are out of control, and now they metastasize to your lungs and liver. So you desperately need to keep taking a big dose of RSO. It's got to be hard though when you're in Iowa.
It's extremely difficult. Even if I can find anything, it's usually not what I need.
I understand. Well, I just want to say God bless you, and I'm sorry to find you going through this. Don't you agree, Casper?
Absolutely. And I think that to make criminals out of patients is just beyond comprehension. I know that Ed Rosenthal walked this path when he had to deal with growing medical marijuana for his patients. I know there's been a handful of patients across the United States who've gone through what you've had to walk through.
Not just a handful.
It's horrible. It is.
Many. I have known 100 people myself who have been denied organ transplants or being taken off the liver or kidney transplant list because they tested for medical marijuana once.
And what makes
that's a death sentence.
What makes it a travesty?
Every one of those people died.
Is that the medical community has known long before anybody else has known the value of this plant. Long before they began using it for paper, before they began using it they were using it for medicinal purposes. And our doctors and our nursing staff are there and take a pledge to help you get healthy and to get over disease and to get beyond the pains that come at you, and for them to take from you the medication that you need to do that, and to stand between you and your pharmaceuticals needs, and to call you a criminal when you reach for your medication is not only wrong, it is a travesty.
It's outrageous. We have a caller who's standing by. We're almost out of time, but no, we don't. Okay. So you had the Benton McKenzie on your show just yesterday on the Time for Hemp Radio Network. I know that's been busy with that.
So I'm the face behind the voice. Hello.
So we are just about out of time. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience in closing, Loretta or Ben?
It's a talk show.
Yep.
Okay, I understand. You said a lot, and I appreciate that. If people want to find out more, it's Free Benton is a website, freebenton.org. Freebenton.org, or go to facebook.com/freebentonmckenzie. That's MacKenzie. Free Benton McKenzie. Of course, Casper, you want to
remind people that after the broadcast every Friday, we get together for a DARE meeting. You come down and we dare you to smoke what I smoke and get up and walk. We dare you to pack a bong. We dare you to roll a joint with us.
Okay, and you can find out more about our work. Just go out to our various websites. Thank you for watching. Tune in next week and help us restore hemp. Good night.
Prohibition has to stop. Children dying while we legislate the crop. Cannabis is more than just a weed. Cannabis is a tree of life to me.